It's clear that TARP has become a recipe for political corruption. It must be stopped, and stopped now. For more on this, we turn to someone who is trying to stop TARP from growing any further, Republican Congressman from Indiana, Mike Pence. Congressman, do you believe that the president is now stonewalling the independent investigator?
Well, we do. We're very troubled by the decision by the administration to essentially cut out the Special Inspector General for TARP from the administration of this latest use of the TARP funds. You know, I don't know that I could have put it better than you just did, David. That overview brought back some bad memories. You know, I remember more than a year ago now when I and a majority of House Republicans voted against the Wall Street bailout, the creation of the TARP, not once but twice. Among our concerns, beyond, in my view, the wrongness of taking $700 billion in bad decisions on Wall Street and transferring it to Main Street to our children and grandchildren, was also the unaccountability of this. Right. And to address that, if you'll remember, there's actually statutory language within TARP that any monies that are returned are to actually go to deficit reduction. And now we've seen not only the auto bailout, as you mentioned, the other bailouts, now the small business fund. TARP has morphed into essentially an unaccountable slush fund for the Obama administration, and I commend the Inspector General for digging in his heels and saying he's got a job to do and insisting on enforcing the restrictions that exist in TARP.
But, you know, Congressman, when this thing started, of course, it was under a Republican administration scoreboard,
right.
And I believe you had the same doubts. We could see that it was inevitable that when you give this much power, this much money, close to $1 trillion, to one branch of government that was never intended by the Founding Fathers to have the purse strings, you were going to have trouble.
Well, I really agree with that. I remember when we were... if you do remember, scoreboard remember certainly, David, that when the request for the $700 billion came to Capitol Hill, I think it was about $1 billion a word in the 3-page memorandum, and they sent the administration, the Bush administration, to your point, sent the request to Capitol Hill on a Thursday. They wanted the legislation on the president's desk by Monday, and that transfer of hundreds of billions of dollars, as you said, from the legislative branch and its accountability to the American people in the political process to the executive branch simply almost inevitably has created these unanticipated outcomes. I mean, when people were voting for the TARP, I don't think they thought we were buying auto companies or bailing out domestic automobile companies. And as you know, and I've got a heart for small business. I grew up in a small business family. I'd like to see us push for tax relief to get small businesses rolling again, and I've supported loans through the SBA. But to go to the TARP funding as the resource for transferring new dollars into a small business loan is just an abuse of the process.
Congressman, it's even worse.
And it's another argument to end the TARP altogether.
Exactly, and it's even worse because Mr. Borofsky are the eyes of Congress. Whenever you have that much money held by the executive branch, you need congressional oversight. And if they cut off, if they blind Mr. Borofsky, they can start using this money for blatant political purposes, and that's not only not right, it should be illegal. It's at least unconstitutional.
Yeah, David, that's right. And of course, the administration, I think their explanation is they don't want the small business loans to operate under the restrictions of TARP. But, well, okay, well, why don't you come to Congress and request those funds separate from TARP? We have a legislative process. You know, I think the American people are getting tired of these kind of these kind of new streams of funding, these kind of new mechanisms for achieving what the orderly administration of our branches of government will achieve if the process is allowed to work.
Well, and a slush fund is Banana Republic stuff. That does not raise anywhere near to the level that we hope our government should raise it. By the way, Mr. Borofsky was on earlier. I just want to play a clip and get your reaction. We talked about whether the TARP is becoming a slush fund. Let's listen.
And the fact that TARP has been extended, which is a policy decision we don't criticize, but it sends a very powerful message that the Treasury is sitting on a war chest of hundreds of billions of dollars that are available, that if another institution fails, Uncle Sam and the taxpayer are waiting to bail them out.
Well, is it fair to call it a slush fund, an administrative slush fund now that they can use for whatever purposes they want?
Well, the statute as passed does give the Treasury a great deal of flexibility of using that money.
And, Congressman, it's important to remember this guy is a Democrat. He is a lifelong Democrat. He allegedly contributed $200 to the Barack Obama campaign, according to one press report. So there's no way he could be criticized as doing this for hack political reasons.
Yeah, and let me commend Mr. Borofsky on your air for being a man of integrity and for communicating to the American people the truth about what TARP has become. I mean, we had colleagues in the House and in the Senate who made an effort to end the TARP, to cut it off with half of the money distributed, and that's been turned back. And we have efforts led by Barney Frank and others that now want to deal with the financial services reform by creating a permanent bailout fund. Bottom line is the American people are sick and tired of the borrowing and the spending and the bailouts. And I also think they're sick and tired of Washington doing one thing and then it morphing into another. We ought to let the Inspector General do his job with the TARP funding. We ought to give the American people, not just the minority party, but the American people, their eyes and ears into how those resources are spent, or we ought to do away with the TARP fund once and for all.
I have to go, but before I go, is there anything, if the White House continues to stonewall the Inspector General, is there anything the minority could do? Could we take it to the Supreme Court in some way if you protest what the president's doing?
Well, I think, all options would have to stay on the table, both with regard to the legislative process and the judicial process. The TARP was created for a specific purpose. While I didn't agree with that outcome, I do believe that's the law of the land. We ought to make sure that the TARP money is distributed in a manner that is consistent with the law, and Republicans are determined to do that.
And I think Mr. Borofsky would agree with you on that. Mike Pence, wonderful to see you, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, David.